Hey, this is Seaniebee. My guest today, I'm going to open with his own words. I've been the chubby kid. I've been at the top of Tower 1. I've caught a 10-pound tuna. I've been in the background of over 150 wedding albums. I've lost my mum at 19. I've driven cross-country alone. I've been bitten on the nose by an ostrich. I've been stranded in Mexico with a remedial grasp of the Spanish language. I've learned you can save someone from a falling piano, but you can't save them from themselves. I've taken my nephew to a pet store. I've moved from the north to the south. I've avoided an elementary school fight by convincing the other guy I was Jason's twin. I've built many forts. I've swam in a sea note. I've been a bouncer. I've valet parked Rolls Royces and rust buckets. I've worked for the CIA. I've walked down the Seine in a downpour. I've learned to surprise myself. I've seen most of my music idols live. I've naively wondered how to explain beauty to a blind person, when in reality they could probably explain it better to me. I've been married, I've been divorced and married again. I've lived in 4 different states. I've kissed a girl in the solitary confinement chamber at Alcatraz. I've produced a documentary. I've had really long curly hair. I felt the frozen mist of the Galfus Falls in Iceland. I've talked my way into a fully operational prison in Dublin. I've been on set of 2 real-world houses. I've danced in Old San Juan. I've toured the ruins in Athens. I've lived with nomads in the Sahara Desert. I've illegally fished with villagers on Lake Victoria. I've been mistaken for a celebrity in Kyoto. I've written and directed a play. I've had my own classic rock radio show. I've eaten the best meal of my life at 3,843 meters. I've picked fruit by moonlight in California. I've jumped out of a plane. I've wrestled professional midget wrestlers. I've picked tea in Sri Lanka. I've moved everything halfway across the world. I've started over again and again. I've been recklessly in love. I've been my own worst enemy. I've been, and he is, my good friend Jason DeTurris. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, so we can finish up now. We're here today in Jason's house in California, in Los Angeles, Century City. We're having a nice glass of sparkling rosé, courtesy of Jason. I've been staying here with him for the last couple of weeks. He very kindly put me up, and we're going to hear what Jason knows about all that stuff. Which one should we start with? I know the one about Dublin. That's people. A lot of my listeners are from Dublin, and you ended up going into one of the roughest jails in Dublin by mistake.
Well, it was actually by intent. My ex-wife was half Irish, and her grandfather was wrongfully imprisoned by the English.
Yes.
Not that I really had
many of us.
Not that I had any grasp of what that meant, but I had promised my father-in-law that I would take her there and we'd go see it. And we ended up lost, walking from Grafton Street into something that seemed pretty shady. Found a taxi and told him we wanted to go to Mountjoy Prison. And he definitely tried to dissuade us multiple times, and I was resolute. And then we arrived, and he tried to explain that it wasn't the prison, that was the museum. It was an actual methadone operational prison. So I pulled the security guard aside and I said, listen, we're from America.
Yeah.
My wife's grandfather was wrongfully imprisoned by the English, and so he didn't let us in, but I asked to speak to his boss, who used to pour concrete in Manhattan. He was tickled. He was absolutely tickled that I was really interested in getting in there, and he gave us a personal tour. So,
what was it like in there? Most of my friends in Dublin, including myself, have never been inside that. Look, thankfully. But
I don't recommend it. It felt like going into a colonial fort.
Yeah.
The walls were shaped in triangles so that people couldn't escape. The inmates were in cages and trying to climb up on the ceiling. They tried to keep us away from that because they had just let them out for lunch or whatever they were doing. But he gave a kind of a historic tour of Easter Rising.
Yeah.
It was just interesting. The best part about it really is watching people's faces years later when I meet Irish people and tell them that I've been in Mountjoy Prison.
It's positively Dickensian, I would imagine, but it's got a pretty bad rap. Jason and I met, I think, in 2008. Is that right?
Yeah. Hence the rosé.
Hence the rosé, because we met actually in Cannes at the Advertising Festival, and I ended up working as a colleague of Jason's in JWT New York from about that time for 2 years, I'd say, but we became fast friends, and we've encountered and enjoyed a lot of pints together over those years. You're from Long Island.
Long Island, 110-mile island that connects Montauk to Manhattan.
Jason's father, who I know well, hello if you're listening, he is a guy who sounds like and looks a little bit like sort of what Frank Sinatra would be like today. I dig him.
Had he made it. I'll drink to Frank.
What was it like growing up?
I mean, I grew up in a middle-class family on Long Island, but it was felt a little bit rougher than it should have been.
Meaning?
I don't know. I think there was definitely a lot of bravado. You're 2 seconds from a fight, or people chasing people through the hallways, or, and it was suburban kids, but it was like a breeding ground for that kind of attitude and knowing how to handle yourself.
Yeah. And school?
Straight C student, probably. Like
the amount of people who I get on this show are straight C students.
Like I thought C meant creativity, so I went into. I thought I was doing well. Yeah, I wasn't a great student by the traditional measures. Until this day, I still think if I've done anything well, it's because of emotional intelligence, not book smarts.
Did you go to college after?
Yeah.
What did you do in college?
I went to a small school in Virginia. It was the only school, because we had moved to Virginia from Long Island, and it was the only school that had advertising in any compelling way in that year. So I went to a small school there.
In Richmond, right?
Well, no, it's Blue Ridge Mountains. I went to Radford University.
Okay.
I was trying not to say it. That's how proud of it I am. And then from there, I did get into a great program for grad school, which is the VCU then Ad Center.
Did you always know you wanted to get into sort of this communications or ad business? Or?
You know what? It started with Matchbox cars.
Right.
So I used to play with Matchbox cars. We had this stone floor, so it wasn't neat little avenues between the stones, and I used to drive the cars through there and do my vroom vroom and look up, and I would see a car with this term I had no idea what it meant, APR, and I was just driving down the road, and I genuinely I genuinely remember being like, this is the absolute most boring moment for the greatest thing I could ever own. I mean, all I wanted was a car when I was a kid. And then it turns out my aunt worked at NWR, which was the oldest continental ad agency. My sister Alicia was an art director and very creative. So I think those two women kind of opened the door of what that was for me, and that notion that there was always something new and different in a creative pursuit. I wasn't going to become a banker and just look at numbers the rest of my life.
Some of the things that I listed out at the top of the podcast presumably happened around this time when you were sort of between college or leaving college.
There's this thing called your book when you graduate in advertising. Right now, everyone's got a website, but your book was like your campaigns and everything. I spent a lot of time creative writing between the tortured age of 12 and 13, unrequited love all the way up, and I guess I just wrote a lot. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and scribble things down, and so what I did was I did my resume, and I did a campaigns book with my strategy and the work, and then I created by hand a little 4x4 booklet called Insights and Excerpts. So the whole 20 pages of it were quotes from things that I had written in poetry classes and creative writing classes. And on the back panel, I just thought, I don't remember the moment that I did it, but I started writing, I just thought, if I'm going to go into this world where I'm supposed to understand people, maybe I should understand what I've done. And so I put that as a blue vellum back page in this little book, and anyone I interviewed with thought that page was like the single most interesting artifact. People felt like, I've got a sense of who you are.
Tell me about the CIA thing.
I can give you some broad.
Burn after reading.
I can give you some broad strokes. So my mother actually worked for, and it's sad now because she's been gone so long, I forget if it was NSA or NRO, but when someone in your family gets a job like that, they go through everyone's trash, so out of the blue she came home and had some program, and it said, you've already been audited. If you're interested in doing internships and projects, you can.
Because she was working there.
Yeah. I mean, everyone in my family had been,
right.
I guess, they had to make sure that, everyone was on the up and up, and they weren't hiring someone who had alcoholism or espionage or...
My son is a spy.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny part. So I did, through the internship program, 2 years, and then it bled over, and I did some holidays and stuff. So I can't really talk about any of that, nor should I.
So how come you didn't get bitten by that bug to work in that whole area?
Well, like I said, I was playing with Matchbox cars and looking at bad ads, going, I want to do good ones at a young age. It didn't seem on brand for me. It just didn't seem like the right path. And also, to be very honest, growing up in New York, you have a chip on your shoulder. And I don't think that I intended to see myself in Virginia forever.
Right. The other bits and pieces, one of the things on your long list at the top was that you've been in 150 wedding photographs. You need to explain that, because people will be going, how did you manage that? That was DJing, was it?
Yeah. So my next door neighbor was probably 8 years older than me, and he had a small DJ company. And my mom negotiated with his mom that I'd be like his helper, which back then, for the first few years, meant carrying like 50-pound record boxes and running wires and taping them down and wearing probably the most cobbled together tuxedo. There's a certain period in Northern Virginia where if you got married, had a prom, a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, or a class reunion, I was in the background of the picture. I mean, we did 3 to 4 gigs a weekend. And, I look back on it and I'm like, what was, I had a great girlfriend and we definitely hung out, but I'm like, well, I worked most of high school through that free time. Yeah. But it also matured me, because people treat you as an adult when you're rolling in to a hotel or a bar or a restaurant or someone's house, and you're there to do business, and you're interviewing whoever's getting married on what they like and what they don't like, and do we have to look out for any crazy uncles or drunk people? So, not being very comfortable in front of a crowd, I had to put a microphone in front of my face and talk to hundreds of people every weekend. And I think that was a big help.
Yeah, all these sort of things. Did you start traveling around that time at all? Or?
So I could find it for you, but I made a list in 5th grade of things I wanted to do before I died. It's a confluence of things. First of all, you should know that my family all lived abroad before I was born. My father worked for Grumman. He was part of the team that put the LEM on the moon, and from an engineering perspective, and then he got into proposals. My mom, Caroline, my father, Louis, my brother, Louis, my sister, Dina, my sister, Alicia, moved to Iran. I think they lived in Isfahan and visited Tehran, or lived in Tehran and visited Isfahan. And they were there for 2 years.
70s?
76 and 77. Oh, so when the Shah walked out, they were like gone already by a couple months. So my house on Long Island had Persian rugs, mosque windows, copper pots, Persian fables in the fancy room, where the Christmas tree would go. Anyway, long story short, you can't take a kid on Long Island and sit down every Thanksgiving and Christmas and talk about the camels you rode, the time you went to Egypt, the boat in Greece, when you stopped in Hong Kong on the way back, and have him be content with going to Disney World. And so when I was in 5th grade or 6th, I can't remember, I made a list of things I wanted to do. Drive across country in a convertible was one. Find a cave or an island that no one's been to. Pretty sure, unless I've been really drunk, that hasn't happened. How do you describe beauty to a blind person?
Right.
Which was in that. Anyway, so I've always wanted to travel, and every decision I've made has been with an eye towards that. So my first internship in advertising was in San Francisco during the dot-com bust. And all I wanted to do was go to San Francisco. The agency called me and said, we'll put you on some coach flight. It was probably like, God knows how much, $700 ticket or something, maybe less. And I said, can you give me that in gas money? This was my line, and they loved it. I said, if you want me to advertise to the country, I need to see it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'd only been past the Mississippi once to Wisconsin.
That doesn't count.
Don't get me started. So I drove across country by myself. I had tumultuous relationship at the time, and she wanted to go with me, and I said, no, I think I need to do this because I want to be in control of the radio, and if I feel like I need to make a left or a right, I don't want anyone in the car suggesting. Like I said, I'm also a pleaser, so if someone wants to go one way or the other, I might be inclined to do that. And what I did was I ended up as an extra in a Showtime series with Lawrence Taylor, dressed as a transgender person. I taught someone how to play roulette in Vegas, and I think I gave her first cigarette. She won $700. Went to the Grand Canyon and slept in it by myself.
You're doing a lot of this stuff on your own. Did you feel like you were different when you were younger from the other guys? Like, did you? Because like a lot of your stuff is very. It's almost like you're sitting down with yourself and going, I'm going to do all this stuff. Whereas a lot of people, I think, they kind of fall with their friends and all that kind of stuff. Did you have like a kind of an independence?
I didn't, but there is this weird.
I know you're very extrovert, right? And you're all.
Well, no, but I would still love to go drive across the country by myself. I love my wife. Like, I love Shannon, and I would enjoy it with her. But those moments. This morning, I spent 4 hours alone for the first time in 2 months. It's extremely valuable. Yeah. It crystallizes things. It also is time to write and refill the tank of insight or perspective. Yeah. But there was this weird thing my dad used to say, which I hated, but I think it kind of sunk into the soil, which was, because he is a little bit Sinatra, and Italian, Irish, New Yorker, which is my kids are leaders and not followers. Now, when you're the chubby kid, not the smartest kid, and not with the hottest girl in school, you don't feel like that, right? Growing up, definitely was in there, and I felt like when we moved to Virginia, I just had a chip on my shoulder from New York, probably a little bit in the DNA from him. My mom was friends with everyone. He was always a big personality, and you blend that. Like, I don't think you can outrun DNA. That's why I said you can save someone from a falling piano, but you can't save them from themselves. I dated someone who was bipolar, and I mean, I'd be crying trying to help that person, and there was really nothing to. You are who you are. You're wired, whether you know it or not.
So you're learning all these things, and you're still you put down a whole bunch of things when you were like 12 or 13 as a kind of checklist. That seems to me to be strange for a kid to do that, because I think, like, I look back at my own thing, and I would love to have had the foresight to do that, but I didn't.
I don't think it's weird. I bet you I just was a little bit more, not that I would have known this word back then, but into codifying it. Kids want to be president or astronaut or a baseball player or, God knows what. I'm sure they said it, but I started to write things down. Again, I think because, my friends and I were probably not talking about these things, and so we would play Ghost in the Graveyard or Hide and Go Seek, or someone found a dirty movie in a bush, and that was interesting for a week. We didn't talk about, like, how do you describe beauty to a blind man?
The bit that Jason does in advertising is the bit that I do in advertising. So for those who don't know much about the business, it's the strategic planning area, which loosely is about, I guess, a bridge between the client and the brand and the creative process and the consumers, and we're supposed to know all about the consumers and all that stuff.
This is the most heartless description of what I do I've ever heard. Yeah, well, I think you should strike this from the record.
I've thrown it out anyway, so I've covered it ad nauseum, as I said in some previous podcasts. But one of the key things about what the job requires, to me, and I think Jason would agree, is curiosity. The people that we look to hire, I think, above anything, are the ones that you get the feeling that they're curious, and I think that you can see that strain in you all the way back to when you were little.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would amend, if I can, to that is it's not above everything. I think it's the starting point. If someone's just curious, it's not enough, but it's how you take that curiosity and crystallize answers and hypotheses that make life more interesting. I think advertising has lost its ability to move people. But anyway,
tell me about how you got into the business then, from the whole college, CIA, traveling around, DJing. What was your break?
So I was in the school that I was almost embarrassed to tell you of, and I was in the advertising program, and there was a guy who knew someone I knew, and he was 2 years older than me. And I just looked at him, having lived in New York, and I said, how are you getting to Madison Avenue from here? And here meant the Blue Ridge Mountains, a small college that even in Virginia people would turn their nose up to at times. And of course it was like 1,000 miles, right? So I'm like, how are you taking this class and going to the only place I really know of where advertising's king? He said, I'm going to apply to the VCU Ad Center. So 2 years before I could apply, I had ordered the application, reviewed it, and knew that's what I was going to do. In that school, not only did I make one of my best friends and other good friends, I did a documentary with Julian Koenig, Bob Levinson, and Roy Grace, who all worked for DDB, who did the Think Small.
Yeah, Volkswagen.
Yeah, Think Small, Lemon, all of that. So as a 22-year-old or whatever I was, I got to sit with them. Julian's passed on now. I went to Bob Levinson's Private Island. These are advertising Hall of Fame people. And they were so generous. And the nuggets they gave me.
Did you pick the documentary yourself so that you could get to these guys?
I was told by the professors that the Volkswagen story had been done. Everyone knows it. And so I pitched it as, I want to talk about the personal relationships on the team and in the agency that allowed the best work in advertising, arguably, ever to be done. My pitch started with, this is the Sistine Chapel of advertising.
Yeah. So this is a very famous ad campaign for Volkswagen back in the 60s. Doyle Dane Bernbach, led by creative genius Bill Bernbach, and these are the guys who were behind the scenes. The lemon that he talks about was just a black and white picture of a Volkswagen, one of the most famous ads in the history of advertising, about the fact that, occasionally that you can get a dug car. And the Think Small was at a time when all American cars were huge, and there was just a very simple small shot of the Volkswagen, and they were trying to sell the idea that net size isn't necessarily everything. And there was a whole pile of them. In fact, to this day, Volkswagen is still probably one of the top car advertisers.
Well, they've had trouble now, but let me correct one thing, and I'm sure this will be on the cutting room floor. But when I met Julian, he was flown to Germany with Bernbach and Helmut Krohn to look at the facility where they made them. Putting your ad or putting your product up with lemon over it in those days, and even now, would be heresy. It's saying our product is broken, doesn't work. When you read the small copy, it went on to say that there were more quality assurance individuals in the factory than anything else. So Julian told me, and this is like 40, 50 years after he did this ad, if you listen to clients carefully, they will speak ads to you. It's interesting because agencies are positioned as, we know better, and we're just, give us your stuff and we'll make it great. This was a man who is in the Hall of Fame of advertising, and he's giving credit to listening to his client because he heard something in what they said that he elevated. And I think that's really beautiful, and I think that's interesting and a testament to what those guys were doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the headline is so beautiful as well because it's so easy to go no lemons, because we have the testing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's really easy to do that press ad safe.
Yeah, there's tension in it.
Yeah, there's tension in it. So, I mean, the other thing I would say, apart from, in my years in the ad business, what you were tapping into here as a kid by going behind the scenes and examining the human relationships behind the campaign and getting people's stories and seeing where people stuck their neck out for better work. That to me is a thing that has also crumbled. I think client cockiness, and they think they know everything, client fear, and they want to try and do the safest thing. This feeling that if we are in a mass market, we should do advertising that looks like the category. But also within agencies, that the internal politic of companies has moved from something where there is this kind of camaraderie and fun and sort of to a kind of a, not all agencies, but a lot, I think. And I think that's where that's where creativity does suffer.
I mean, this is another one where, like the CIA, where I should say no comment.
Yeah.
I will say this. I've now been fortunate enough to be inside companies like Rolex, Infinity, Tylenol, Motorola, Nokia, Under Armour, just a number of clients to see how different organizations operate. And I think you have to learn how to socially engineer an idea. So now you're not just responsible for finding it, shepherding it, making it great, but then, and this was always true to some extent, but
so
I feel
explain what you mean there by social engineering.
like you have to figure out how to create the environment for that idea to live. 1 or 2 out of every 10 things that an agency does is great, right? And we live for that. It's like you're going to the plate and you're swinging the bat, cricket bat, baseball bat, whatever you want to use, and there will be a grand slam in you. There may be 2 or 3, but you're going to be missing a lot. And you're going to be missing a lot because of a number of factors. CMOs shift, and that changes agreements. You're dealing with people whose jobs are on the line. And so social engineering is about understanding the landscape, who's aligned with what, who needs to be brought in when, and it's a very complex strategy for your strategy, right? It's like the lubrication to your strategy. Without it, it's a rough ride. And I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done poorly. And I think that one of the keys to the kingdom in probably any business but ours is being able to do that, ask those questions, understand it. Anyone who would be on the other side of the aisle, bring them to your side early. Understand why they're on their side. And that takes a lot of empathy. It takes a lot of work.
We were actually, I was asking you how you got your break, so just at the risk of forgetting the question.
Okay.
You were doing a documentary.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. So, all right. Basically, when I did the documentary, there was a gentleman named Rick Boyko who was the chief creative officer at Ogilvy and Mather, which at the time,
a massive ad agency in the world.
Yeah, they've done a few things.
Yeah.
David Ogilvy and the gang.
Sorry. Yeah.
Again, no comment. So I had a pitch to do the documentary for Volkswagen. When we won it, we got to produce it. And Rick Boyko gave us 10 grand to produce it. I got 10 grand to basically take a production team of people who've never produced anything to go talk to these luminaries who probably have shaped my whole industry view. Rick happened to be at a board meeting at the ad school. I ran up to him and I said, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you." And I gave him a copy of the documentary and I said, "I really appreciate the opportunity." He was really touched and just out of the blue said, "What are you? Planner?" And I said, "I'm a planner." He goes, "All right, I'm going to have you talk to Tony Wright next week." Tony Wright was the global chief strategy officer. Tony happened to be out of the building. I met our mutual friend Robin Bardolia, did a couple interviews, gave everyone my little book with the I've Been that you opened this interview with. And after that, I was on the global team for Motorola. I wrote the launch brief for the Moto Razr, and basically had almost no supervision.
So you basically land your first job at a pretty senior level on Motorola.
I was junior, but the thing is, you hire good people and you get out of the way.
Yeah.
My boss had, he was going to ascend to co-head the department. He was more focused probably on the sexy cell phone category and was like, this kid seems competent on the B2B stuff. And ultimately it all tied together, but I was just earnest and drank a whole bunch of Pepto-Bismol because I was probably going to shit my pants. And again, I was in my early 20s. I was empowered very young to run pieces of business that someone my age probably wouldn't. But this is the issue. I never wanted anyone to know my age because I've always been younger than the post I've had or the responsibility I was given. When people asked me how old I was, I would say, "How old do you think I am?" And they would always add,
like a little bitch.
They would always add 2 to 3 years, and I would head nod and never verbally say yes.
Wow.
Because I was so insecure that someone would find me out or someone would say, "All right, little tyke, get back over there."
The traumatic thing that happened. I mean, you went to Deutsch, JWT, and Crispin. I don't really want to go in and talk necessarily about, unless there's anything you feel we should talk about in any of those agencies. But the traumatic thing that happened in your life then was the death of your mother.
Well, those are different generations. So when I was 19, I was a sophomore in college. Mom was the glue of the family. Her gift was that all 4 kids secretly believed, and probably still and should, that each of us were her favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know how you pull that off.
That's rare, I'd say.
I really don't know how you pull that off. And God, if I ever have kids, I hope I can pull that off. She passed very quickly, within 2 weeks or less of cancer metastasizing in her. I had to drive home with haste one day from college, 4-hour drive, where I'm just crying to my windshield, screaming, "Take me instead," that kind of stuff. And I arrived back in Northern Virginia, and within a day or two, she passed. And so that did change me. I remember my ex for a long time was like, "I don't think I've ever seen you cry." Like, I think it just, something happened to me. I'm very emotional, and still am, but it changed me because I felt like I had to carry on minus something very important or guiding or valuable.
Yeah.
And I haven't thought about it, Sean, but I don't know, maybe that had a bit of spin on the ball for me as I went into the rest of my life and my career. Like, she gave me everything I needed from her. But when I look at my siblings, and I'm the youngest, they all got 14 years, 7 years, 11 years, whatever it was, more each of that wisdom, of that emotional intelligence, of that ability to be anyone's best friend and sincere about it. She just had a lot of great things. But then she had her quirks. Like, I remember one time going into a video store, and my brother had been using her card, and so there was like a $24 thing that she had to pay to get me probably like Land Before Time or whatever crappy thing we were gonna watch. Actually, it's not crappy, it's a great movie. Lovely. And I remember her just telling the woman across the counter, "Does he look like me? You let someone named Lewis take out movies on my account?" And she goes, "You have nothing between your ears." And I was just like, oh my God, it was the underbelly that I'd never seen. Like,
she was trying to get out of the fine.
Well, she was just, if she didn't believe in something or thought someone was doing her wrong, she was not afraid to stand up, which was amazing. But she's the nicest person I've ever met. But it happened like 2 or 3 times, and it was always in a situation like that, and I'd always feel like I had to disappear, like put my invisibility cloak on. Anyway, she's amazing. I think calibration between her and my father's kind of alpha bravado, I think there's some coding in there. I got a little bit of both.
My friend Glenn Condy and I spoke very early in the series of Pint with Seaniebee about losing your mother, and he's a similar situation to you in a sense that she died quickly. It knocked the stuffing out of him, and he mentioned this. Did you feel like for a lot of your life after that that she was like on your shoulder? She was like that you were kind of you were putting yourself up to her standards or whatever she
I think her standards are ingrained, but it's weird because when you're a certain age, I had friends putting drugs in front of me, and I'm like, is she watching? Or you're like looking at porn, or you're having sex, or whatever you're doing. And I was 19.
Yeah.
Not that you only do those things when you're 19. No. But I think it affected me in other ways. I was very stoic. I was very numb for a long time. It took me a while to get my empathy back for people because I had such a gut punch. The family is great, and we all take care of each other and care about each other, but I will always believe that she was the glue. Right. So it tears your worldview apart. It tears the comfort you have in the world apart. And I went back to college, and college is I turned the corner on the grades, by the way. I had this whole thing where every day I'd walk up the library stairs in exactly the center of the stairs because I was going in there to study, and I put myself on like this rigorous kind of ritual trajectory that like I never had before in high school. And
after her death.
Yeah, because no one had, I don't know if I told you this, but no one had gone away to university in my family. I was the first.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so it was kind of like a big honor. My mom passed on December 5th, and my finals were 2-3 weeks after that. And I did not defer my finals. I basically said she wouldn't want me to do that. So I was batting like a 3.5, 3.45, 3.8, whatever it was for...
Means nothing to me, but anyway, that's average.
It's like B plus.
B plus,
right?
Okay, yeah.
And then granted, I was never better than a C student before these years.
Yeah.
And I had one class that I was an A student in, and it was a religion class.
Wow.
This woman was amazing, and we always tried to figure out what religion she was. But she was, like, she would never tell you. She was agnostic on, she taught you everything equally. Turns out she was an atheist. But she asked me personally if I wanted to take the final, because I had gotten a letter from the school saying I didn't have to take anything. But she was holding it in her hand, and I said, yeah, my mom would want me to. And I sat, I think that class was actually in like an old church or something, and I sat on the back steps and took it. And one of the essay questions was something like, John's mom dies of cancer. And like, she didn't change the question. It was in there. And this was 2 weeks after my mom died of cancer.
But she knew.
She knew, but she wasn't going to change the test or the question.
Of course not, yeah.
And I shanked that so bad. I was her favorite student. She was mean to everyone. And I'd always sit up front, knew my shit. And I got a D in that class. And I kind of walked away going, good. Like, I didn't know how I felt about religion, and it's a whole nother topic. And, I was an altar boy, never diddled. And,
same.
Yeah, made it through that gauntlet. But, I don't know. Religion for me, it became spirituality, not religion. And that helped me not worry about my mom looking on for me. It helped me say she's not dead because she lives within me, that type of stuff.
So one of the things that we didn't mention in the long intro of all the great things you've done, I suspect because this is a more recent thing, is you've just launched a rum brand. Tell me the story behind that, and I believe it's got something to do with Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah, the man. Well, I was part of a team that launched the rum brand, that's for sure.
We have a bottle of it on the table here,
Yeah.
so that's what you might tuck into later.
A glass canteen.
Very cool packaging.
So unlike most projects that I think you or I have been a part of, I was given a blank piece of paper, which is fitting, to come up with the Ernest Hemingway rum brand.
By who? The family?
So a few very, very brave and very smart venture capitalists came to us and said that they had a relationship with the Hemingway Foundation. So they wanted to know what the Hemingway rum brand could be. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was a conversation that was had many times over the years. And the rum brand is called Papa's Pilar. Mm-hmm. The first thing we said is, if we put Ernest Hemingway's face on the bottle, we lose.
Why?
Because it just seemed overly commercial.
Right.
And this was going to be authentic. Mm-hmm. Fast forward through many months of research and work, I'm sitting in Bozeman, Montana, in a very tiny kind of hotel cabin situation. Patrick Hemingway, his wife, and his daughter, so Ernest's daughter-in-law and granddaughter, came to a presentation that myself, a gentleman named Neil, and David, we presented to the Hemingways. And I started that presentation by saying, this was homework for us. It's home for you. So let me know if anything feels off. And at the end, Patrick Hemingway, who's a very sweet, very kind man, said, I wish all the people that wrote books about my father had done as much research as you did. The strategy and tagline is never a spectator. And never a spectator was supposed to be the sum of one of the most iconic personalities, that I've ever studied, in Ernest Hemingway. When he went to cover the war as a journalist, he ended up in war. He would lean over on a bar stool and get into your life and into your head. I mean, he was not a passive person in any way, shape, or form. And the tension that we saw was that rum was for relaxing. Rum, you put a tropical umbrella in.
Yeah.
So we had to create something that had the bravado of Ernest.
Who's Pilar?
So Pilar was his boat, and Papa is what he liked to be called.
Anyway, Papa's Pilar, one of the up-and-coming trendy new rums. Seek it out. So just switching gear a little bit before we finish, we're actually just coming to the end of our bottle.
I did buy two.
We are in a post-Trump world as we are recording this. Like literally a couple of weeks ago, he got the nomination for president of the USA. By the time this goes out, it'll be well into his first term, but there is a veritable pall over much of America at the moment, and uncertainty and fear, and wanted to get your point of view on where you see your country going from here.
I picked a hell of a year to come back. I was living in Hong Kong last year. It was amazing. It's probably my favorite city in the world, even though I love New York. I thought it was a joke. The reality TV maven having a go at it seemed like good fun in the beginning, and then obviously he's galvanized a lot of unhappiness in the country, and I am sad. I hate him as a human. I am physically angry at friends and potentially some family who voted for him. I feel like every day that I see in the news the conservative, potentially racist people he's appointing, I hope that my friends and family who played their small part in getting him there are wincing. I feel like everything it's just like the global economy. There's flourish and there's constriction, and then it's just it happens. Maybe I had a blind eye to what Obama wasn't doing well, but I still like to look at a leader and go, that person's a good person. I feel like there's a whole Darth Vader thing happening right now in the White House, and I'm not happy about it. What I am happy about is I think I can wait it out. I think my wife and I are happy with each other and our friends and our dog and our backyard, and that's where I'll hang out or go back to Hong Kong. I don't know, but that man is a horrible man.
It's interesting hearing you say all that, because you're a much more positive guy than I am. I think in a general sense I'm Mr. Money. But what's your view on a macro level on the future of humanity, the world, going forward? I'll
just say one thing, and it's going to sound depressing, but Shannon and I listened to, speaking of podcasts, something called Hardcore History, and the guy never takes a breath. I forget his name, but he just goes on for like 3 hours about history in a deep, energized way. The world has always been fucked. The world has always had bad people at war for whatever personal agendas. There have been innocent souls crushed and trampled. It's funny, one of my old chief creative officers at Crispin, Ralph Watson, great guy, always has conspiracy theories, and he believes that science fiction is made to socialize us to possible futures that are convenient for the government or an alien race. So when I look at Black Mirror or I look at things that show how we become pacified and slavish to technology, I do believe that that's very, very possible. The good part is I know enough people who don't think that's acceptable. So there's possible and there's acceptable. And there's the tension. And that was the tension in the medieval times. That will be the tension when we have chips in our heads. And we just got to let it ride and see if people who don't believe that that's acceptable can step up.
Last question. What would you say to a young Jason DeTurris or somebody like you, or even somebody who's just listening to this wondering what to do with their lives?
Should have seen that question coming, but I don't have a great answer. I think I believe that the more you follow and head nod and don't challenge, the more vanilla, boring, and unextraordinary your life will be. I see a lot of people just head nodding in meetings or, in life, and I like to shock people. I like to use radical honesty. I like to be self-deprecating at a moment when you don't think you should be, because that's when people feel like they connect with you. So if there was a young version of me or a young friend of mine or whatever, I would probably give them a few ingredients, but it's like jazz. You gotta riff it. Don't go along with everyone. You gotta have a voice. And I've always shared my voice.
It's a good place to leave it. Jason DeTurris, thank you so much for having a pint of sparkling rosé with Seaniebee today. I think the key message that I'm taking out of it is keep your voice, make sure that you stand up for what you believe, and don't be afraid to say it. And we're at a time in the world, I think, when that matters more than ever. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Thanks, Sean. Good to see you here.